Welcome to Burn the Ship, the podcast that helps entrepreneurs go all in on their business, and we introduce them to professionals that can help them to do so. Today, we have a very special guest. Percy, how are you doing today?
I'm doing all right, sir, and yourself?
I'm doing pretty good. I can't complain at all. Nice sunny day out there. Please introduce yourself and the name of your business.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Percy A. King, Esquire, MBA, and I'm a partner with the Valrico Law Group.
Awesome. We so look forward to learning more about your firm. But before that, we want to learn a little bit more about yourself. So if you don't mind, tell us a little bit about your story.
Okay. My name is Percy King, as I said. I am 55 years old, originally from Gary, Indiana. Have done quite a few things in life. Undergrad, Indiana University. I went to school for nuclear medicine. I'm a former chief of nuclear medicine. I have worked probably in most of the states in the United States, at least as a temporary employee. And like I said, I've done an awful lot as far as educational wise. After Indiana University, I decided to change my life and go to law school. I ended up going to Florida A&M University, graduating early, second in my class, which allowed me to have a federal judicial clerkship. I clerked for a senior United States District Court judge in the Middle District of Florida in Jacksonville, Florida. Judge Adams was the first African American state court judge in Duval County history and the first African American federal judge in the Middle District of Florida history. So I clerked for a well-established and respected man. I have worked quite a few places. I'm licensed in Florida and North Dakota. I still have an office in North Dakota. However, I moved back to the Tampa Bay area in 2020, just as COVID was starting.
Okay, awesome. Now, I always like to go back and try to focus on the origin because you started off in one field and ended up in another. Is it where in Gary when you were getting your schooling started, did you have an influence of medical in your family, or was that just something that you chose to spark out on?
Um, in all actuality, I was in a program that they had in the city called Academically Able. They were essentially coming out of elementary school. There were like 35 of us that they sent to the same junior high school. So we had advanced classes. When I went to high school, we had advanced math, and in the book, it had different careers highlighted every chapter because they knew we were going to go to college.
Hmm.
And it just was something that I saw, and I decided to do it.
Yeah, I've never heard of that type of medicine before. Tell us a little bit about what it is you were studying.
Okay, in nuclear medicine, in all actuality, my clinicals were at what's considered to be the best place in the world for it. A hospital called William Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan, outside of Detroit. What we do in nuclear medicine is a bunch of different things. It is part diagnostic, there's part therapy. If you ever heard of the nuclear medicine stress test, a thallium or a cardiolite test, where we stress the heart either via treadmill, dobutamine or something pharmacologic, give an injection, we can tell whether or not you have damage to your heart or if you have any blocked arteries to your heart, which is a precursor to a heart attack. Also, if you've heard of someone who had hyperthyroidism and getting a radioactive iodine treatment to kill the thyroid, we actually do that. I remember the runner Gail Devers, she actually had it. She almost lost her feet from it, but I mean she had the procedure as well. We also do a lot of different things. Lymphoscintigraphy, which is injections in the breast to actually find a sentinel node for breast cancer, so the surgeons know where to go. Bone scans for metastatic cancer. A lot of different things. Hepatobiliary scans, which is to check to see if your gallbladder's working, or if there's blockages in the ducts. Lung scans for pulmonary embolisms. There's a bunch of different testing that we do, but then there's, like I said, certain surgeries as well.
Okay, that is awesome. The thing that I can relate to, I was thinking about how someone I knew had to have that dye in their heart, when they were having a heart attack to see if they had the plaque buildup, so it sounds like that's more of what you're doing there now. That is one serious side of life that you had with that medicine and how you were helping people, but then you took on another serious part of life when it came to the legality of things. How did you change, or what influenced you to even go into that mode of life?
Well, it actually goes back to being from Gary. Being, one of the smart kids, there were a lot of programs. There was a program that was basically for folks who wanted to learn about the law. It was called Junior Patrol. And two of the things that we did was that we actually went to visit police stations. We got a chance to deal with them. And then we also went to a courtroom where we actually saw a mock trial. And I'd always wanted to do that because one of my, shall we say, childhood friends who was older than me, because she was a niece of my mother's boyfriend at the time, she actually is a lawyer who went to Harvard. She actually went to Harvard with President Obama.
Hmm.
And she ended up coming back and being our mayor. But I'd always wanted to do that. And I got the opportunity to do that, and I kind of go more into it and when we get to the burn the ship part.
Oh yeah, no worries at all. Now, you said you took on that education in Florida. How'd you get from north down there to south?
Well, okay, so after finishing at Beaumont Hospital in Royal Oak, Michigan, um, I actually received a call from a radiologist who was in Fresno, California, who had actually done his clinicals at William Beaumont Hospital, and they needed someone, out there. And so they called to see if anybody wanted to go. And I was like, yeah, me. I want to go I want to go to warmth. So I end up in Fresno,
Hmm.
and then from Fresno, end up going back to the cold for a year, but then going back to Texas for a year, and then Sarasota Memorial in Sarasota, Florida, actually contacted me about a position, and I end up in Sarasota in 1999.
Okay, okay. So then you went to school, switched it up, got into law. Now, it seems as if you were very fortunate to work with the gentleman you were saying. You said he was a judge. How'd you come across him?
Well, when you're closer to the top of your class, not everybody actually, qualifies for it. The
Hmm.
federal clerks are, the ones who end up, federal judges and all those different things. It's a real difficult position to get. So I applied to a bunch of different clerkships. And when I saw Judge Adams, I knew that his undergrad was actually at Florida A&M.
Hmm.
And I graduated second in my class, and I got the highest grade in about 25% of my classes. So when I applied, I thought I would have a decent chance. And it was just at the point where I applied, and right after I applied, my mother passed away, and she passed away in my last semester of law school.
Hmm.
And I actually interviewed with his office. They called me on the phone initially when I was at home for her funeral.
Oh man. Okay, I got you. Now you said that there was a lot of things that you learned from being, under him and his tutelage. Do you mind sharing with us a couple of things that you still carry from that experience till today?
There's so many different things. One thing I have to say is that because when I went to law school, I was 39 when I started. I was 42 years old when I started the federal clerkship.
Hmm.
So most of the federal clerks are in their mid 20s, at least the ones who aren't career clerks. So it was a different experience in that I wasn't treated like a kid, especially being that my significant other at the time was working with his lifelong best friend. So I
Okay.
knew his nickname.
Okay.
So it became one of those things where he actually would talk to me about things. I realized that he was so well respected. They have awards named after him. He taught me an awful lot about patience. He taught me an awful lot about dealing with people because he was the one on stage in Jacksonville in the 60s when they had the riot
Hmm.
that where they came to him to try to calm people down. So he is that guy, very intelligent man, and he taught me an awful lot about the law because most people don't know when it comes to the federal clerkships, the federal clerks write the orders for the judges. I had
Hmm.
half of his docket, and then you write the order, and if the judge wants anything changed, it's changed, but if not, they sign it. So he taught me an awful lot about the law through our conversations and the orders that I had to write for him.
And you said you had that experience for 3 or 4 years, or how long were you with him?
4 years. I was with him to basically the Monday after Labor Day in 2012 and to the basically the Friday before Labor Day 2016.
Okay, that's a good deal. Now, after that experience, did you immediately go out on, to join a firm? Tell us a little bit about that transition.
Okay. I'll really get into it in the burn the ship thing as the reason why I didn't necessarily want to go to a firm. But
Hmm.
what I recognize essentially is that being in your 40s and coming out to work, and for the firms that I would be qualified for, they're working you 70, 80 hours a week, and they're used to having extremely young people who are inexperienced. That wasn't necessarily me. I could have gotten one of those jobs, but what I ended up doing is starting a firm with a partner. Unfortunately, that partner was in the Army National Guard, and he was JAG, and they sent him away.
Mm-hmm.
So it left me to go between, because we had office in North Dakota and in Florida. It left me doing everything.
Okay, I got you. So you
Mm-hmm.
had that experience, and now I do want to talk about the burn the ship moment, and then that way you can tell us all about your firm. So they went
Mm-hmm.
off to do some federal things or some military things. You're the attorney.
Mm-hmm.
Uh,
Mm-hmm.
what really made you burn the ship and say, "Hey, look, I'm going to go all in and do my own thing"?
Okay. Well, there were two things, because there were actually, for the most part, two burn the ship moments. The initial one was, coming out, recognizing that society had changed an awful lot, in, shall we say, the different, generations. They're not necessarily as respectful. You also, have an awful lot of issues with time and things of that sort. So I kind of realized it probably would have been better for me to, at least get to the point where I worked outside of a regular firm until I can get to the partnership stage in my life, because then you can go back to a firm. But what ended up happening, as far as, because during COVID, I started off back as a Fed, but I was an assistant federal defender. Basically, the first day of the lockdown, it was my first day at work, and it was basically I had one day there, and then we were, working from home with the exception of having to go to court.
Mm-hmm.
There were some issues there with, sometimes you have supervisors who aren't necessarily, um, good supervisors, and you have, some issues with them, and that's necessarily what happened. A lot of people end up leaving because, he had Napoleon syndrome, and he just didn't appreciate the hard work that a lot of people were doing. At that point in time, I recognized that I definitely needed to burn the ship again, and just because I saw myself doing something I thought I actually had, and I
Mm-hmm.
almost blacked out
Mm-hmm.
because of the level of disrespect sometimes people have. And he was a little guy,
Yeah.
and I just recognized that it wasn't necessarily worth it for me because of my background, that I actually could, do whatever I wanted to do. And then I realized that, okay, I need to do it. And I was fortunate enough to find a group to get with that I actually could burn the ship.
Awesome. Now tell us a little bit about what you got going on now. How are you helping people? What are you
Mhm.
serving? I mean, who are you serving, and what are some of those services you're providing?
Okay. I'm doing an awful lot because the nature of our firm is that we don't step on each other's toes. We have one gentleman who does wills, trust, estates, and he buys and sells businesses. He represents businesses as far as registered agent. We have a gentleman who does family law. I end up helping him with some of the things. I do all the civil litigation.
Mm-hmm.
So it's all types of civil litigation. I'm actually a licensed sports agent. So as far as sports and entertainment, all the different types of things, contract law. As far as litigation, I'm not only a member of the Florida Bar, the State Bar of North Dakota, the 11th Circuit Court of Appeals, which is the great states of Florida, Georgia, North Dakota. I mean, Florida, Georgia, and Alabama. I'm also a member of the North Dakota Bar when it comes to the federal bar. And I'm licensed in both places, doing sports and entertainment as well. So I get an awful lot of cases that require me to have knowledge in a bunch of different things. People call me because they say, well, this lawyer does this, but he doesn't do that. So if you have a case where it's part contract law, it is part business law, it's part, there has a criminal aspect to it. There is a bankruptcy aspect to it because I represent creditors in the bankruptcy court as well. Um, I get those. I get the real difficult things because I had to write the law on a lot of these different things. If it's in insurance things, and a lot of people will, have a business, and if their insurance doesn't cover something, they actually have to hire a lawyer. I will actually defend them when it comes to those things, and also defend them when insurance companies, claim that they don't have coverage. Another thing I still do is I still do federal criminal defense. Um, Law as well. My sentences are, some of the best. period.
Hmm.
So I do all those different things. And when it comes to the federal criminal stuff, because of my medical background, I do an awful lot when it comes to the comorbid mental health issues that people have, from adult antisocial disorder to traumatic brain injuries, to how medications actually affect people, bipolar disorder, depression. All those different things help me to mitigate people's sentences, and they also help me to be able to deal with people. And some of the people that I serve, I do still serve some of the, shall we say, underserved communities, because you do a certain amount of pro bono work.
Hmm.
But I also do lower some rates for certain types of things. For I also do injunctions, because my partner doesn't have the time to do them, and I do well with injunctions.
Hmm.
So I end up lowering my rates for things of that sort. There are certain things that you lower your rates for because people can't afford it. So I serve, all those different communities. I have, sued multi-billion-dollar companies by myself, and I've done very well doing it.
Excellent. Now, I have two follow-up questions based off of what you shared. The first, when you're dealing with the businesses, I know you can help with the employees and the business. Do you have a preference of who you like to work with, the business or the employees?
Here's what I will tell you.
Hmm.
That actually is kind of a loaded question,
Okay.
and it is extremely situationally, dependent,
Okay.
because sometimes the business is a much better client to have, and sometimes the employee is a much better, client to have, and that truly depends on the facts of the situation, because sometimes the business has not done the employee very well, and there's so many pitfalls,
Hmm.
and it becomes one of those things where, as a lawyer, you aren't supposed to look at your client as being, shall we say, good, better, and different, because it becomes difficult for you to service them
Hmm.
if you're actually looking at that stuff. But sometimes you get some situations where that make a difference which client it is. They're not, they're unsavory, shall we say? And still, as a lawyer, and you also have to be able to explain to them that no, this isn't TV. I don't get a chance to lie in court.
Right.
I have to, and there's certain things that you may not necessarily be able to tell me, because if I know them, I cannot really serve you,
Hmm.
because I can't go to court and tell known lies. And a
Yes.
lot of folks don't really understand it. It's not like that. They see, television or movies, and they think it's that way, but it really isn't.
Yes, yes, makes a lot of sense. So it depends on the situation. Now, you have a very broad band in which you can help, because you talked about family law, you've talked about civil, you've talked about business, but you did also mention sports. So that's my second follow-up question. Now, since you've been working on the sports aspect of things all the way to being a sports agent, tell us a little bit about how the NIL has come in to play a little bit more, even from high school, college. Tell us a little bit about that and how you're able to help those athletes with those types of things.
Um, Here's the interesting thing about that. There are a lot of athletes who don't know that they still can actually, qualify, even though they aren't the top, athletes. NIL has helped so many different students change their lives. What people don't understand is, and what people forget for the most part, is that the reason why you go to college isn't actually to get an education. The reason why you go to college is to be able to take care of yourself after thereafter.
Hmm.
Okay? So you are going to college not just to get an education, you're going to college so that you can actually perform in life thereafter. You're going there to get some skills that will allow you to pay the bills, some skills that will allow you to deal with people. Now, if you can have an NIL deal and make it so that once you're done with college, you actually can be set for life. Now, it doesn't mean that everybody's going to get the multi-million-dollar contract, but if you get contracts to where afterwards you can have money to start a business, or afterwards you can have money, you can buy a house. You don't have to actually buy things on credit. If you buy something on credit, you can have great credit. You end up with an 825 plus score. That actually can help. And what you need to do is get with somebody who has a team that can at least show you, all right, once we get this NIL money, we need to make sure that we have a wills, trust, and estate person to set up the trust for you so you don't screw up your money. And if you can have that team around you, you can make it so that, you know, that kid's life is totally different. And that kid can change their parents' lives as well, even if they never make the pros. And that all means not being good enough to make the pros, but not needing to anymore.
Excellent. Thank you so much for sharing that because it's such a huge topic nowadays. You know, people are for it, people are against it, but I appreciate you sharing about how if you put a plan and a purpose around it, it can help set you up even if you don't go to the pros. So definitely appreciate you sharing that. And one of the other things that I would like to ask you to share, Percy, is that I'm confident over your time in Gary, your time in school in the medical, definitely now that you've been an attorney, you have acquired and nurtured a bunch of business skills or best practices that have continuously made you successful. Do you mind sharing with the audience a couple of those best practices? Maybe they can add that to their mix and try to strive toward that same success?
Yeah, and I actually wrote some of them down because I wanted to make sure I didn't miss any of these things,
Okay.
because it's really important.
Hmm.
Um, and basically, the first thing is to plan carefully when you make the leap. That's the old thing. If you fail to plan, you plan to fail. That is extremely true in most cases. The problem is that so many people are willing to listen to somebody who made it big and they didn't plan or whatever, so therefore they say, well, I'm going to make it big too. No, they were extremely lucky.
Hmm.
They were fortunate, whether you believe in religion, they're blessed, they were something. It was. It is not as though they actually had the right plan to actually get there. So you need to have the plan in place. And quite often, what that means is hiring the right people. As far as, because one thing I do is I do business plans for people. And part of the business plan, my business plans kind of look like a prospectus. So therefore, you can kind of use them dually if you're trying to actually get money as well. All
Hmm.
right. Because what you need to do is you have to have the market surveys. You have to have the contingency plans. The contingency plans doesn't mean that, what you're going to necessarily do for work or whatever if this fails. Contingency plans is that if it doesn't go the way that you think it's going to go, which in most cases it won't, how do you actually defeat being defeated? How do you actually get over that hump? If this doesn't happen, you have to have someone else to go to for supplies. If this doesn't work out, you need to have somebody else is going to help you do whatever it is. So if you plan first, then that will help you. Now the next thing is that, um, make sure that you have adequate funding. And this is probably the biggest problem that people have. Everybody's seen those restaurants that they spent a mint on, and within 2 months or 3 months, it was closed. It's because they spent all their money putting this thing together and then didn't realize that they needed money in order to actually move forward. They thought that, oh, well, the day-to-day business is going to make sure that we have money. No, that happens all the time. Whatever type of business it is, if you spend all your money and actually just getting the doors open, then the doors won't be open very long. Now, like I said, to create the contingency plans, and I explained what those were, um, and reduce your personal financial obligations. That is another big thing that gets people, because you still need to make the same amount of money you were making at your job. And if that doesn't happen, then you're in trouble. And you need to make sure that you reduce those things. Now, it may not always be, possible for you to actually reduce it to nothing, but you need to reduce it. Surround yourself with the right people, and commit fully. You don't get a chance to, shall we say, partially commit. There's some people say, "Oh, I'm gonna keep my day job and I'm gonna do it at night." Okay, there are certain things that you can do if you're not, fully starting something to where, if you have a barbecue truck or something like that, yeah, you can do that. But when it comes to most things, you actually need to be able to plan to actually just get it going. Your significant other needs to be able to, toe the line, or family or whatever. So if you do that, that will help you.
Thank you so much for sharing those wonderful things. I love the fact of how you tell people they need to plan first. You
Mhm.
just can't blindly jump into things and expect it to happen. This is not a TV show. This is not, one of those one-off things. But if you plan properly, you can at least try your best to set yourself up for success. So thank you so much for sharing that, Percy. And, we've talked a lot about your journey. We've talked about all of those things inside of business, and you shared those magnificent business skills. Now I want to turn the page just a little bit and talk about you specifically. So let's just say that the business is continuing to go well. You're helping people with all of those things: family law, wills, civil, business, as well as the sports, and time and money is not an issue at all. What is it that Percy would do with some of those some of that time back?
Okay. There's a couple things that I'm working on. I have my own, podcast that I'm doing, but I actually do. I'm working on a couple of law school classes to be able to be a professor in.
Mm-hmm.
Some law school classes that actually don't exist as of right now. The other thing is that I want to travel to a lot of countries that I have not been to, and just spend time there, just dealing with, the people that you see on TV, just the normal people. And then the third thing is that I actually would like to start doing a little bit of acting. I'm not talking about trying to become Denzel or Morgan Freeman or anything like that.
Mm-hmm.
I would like to be around the process. Just being a lawyer for entertainment, that's fine, but I would like to do some of the things. I believe I can do it, and I'm working on it.
Now, there's one thing that I will not deny from you, Percy. If you put your mind to whatever, I'm confident that you can do whatever you want to do. And I want to ask about that second part. Now, you said you want to travel around to some other countries. Did you have any on your top hit list that you're going to soon?
Oh yeah, there's several. Actually, I'm going to Belize next month.
Okay.
Because might end up buying some property there.
Mm-hmm.
With a lot of things that's going on in our country right now, some people may want to leave. But that's one of the countries that I do want to actually travel throughout Europe.
Okay.
I want to go to Sweden. I do want to go to the Netherlands. Of course, same thing. Just that entire area. And I do want to go to Ireland. I've been to Africa, but I want to go to a few more countries in Africa as well.
Awesome. Now, you said that in your first part that you were looking to try to be a professor. Do you think you being taught by Judge Allen that had some influence on you want to be a professor?
Judge Adams, well, not as much. Here's one of those things where, it's an influence from other people.
Mm-hmm.
What has happened is that a lot of folks like, man, we need you out there teaching folks. You know how to do so many different things, and you can actually explain to people. In law school, I was the guy that people came to, was like, yeah, the professor's not, explaining to me the right way. Can you explain it?
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes professors would have me explain certain things because
Mm-hmm.
I was doing so well, and then I explain it and be like, oh, that's all professor had to say. I'm like, well, no, I think about it differently.
Mm-hmm.
They're thinking about it from the way their professors are supposed to teach certain things,
Mm-hmm.
and when it comes to that, it's not necessarily the way that they're taught to teach.
Mm-hmm.
So, the people. So because of that, then you're not going to get the same thing from them. I've kind of molded the dual approach so that people can, have an understanding. It kind of came from, like I said, others telling me that, I should do it, and then I realized how beneficial it would be for them and for me.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing those things. Now, as we move to the next segment, it is our contact information. So if someone has questions about your journey, the business services that you're providing, or just learning more about your story, what's the best way for them to get in contact with you?
Okay, there's two ways. The email address is going to be my name, which is Percy, spelled Percy. Then there's a period, and then it's my last name, King, King, at valricolawgroup.com. Now let me spell it. VALRICOLAWGROUP.com. So Percy.King at valricolawgroup.com. And then I also have a phone number, which is actually my Google Voice that comes to me, 701-595-0529.
Awesome. Now, you said you did have a podcast. What's the name of the podcast, or do you have it out there just yet?
Yeah. It's actually called Kings with an S, Kings Speak.
Okay.
It is available on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and Spotify.
Excellent. Tell us a little bit, I'm taking up a little bit of time there, but tell us about some of the subjects and some of the things that you're doing there and how you're helping people.
Um, that is a lot of different things. There are some legal insight, um, different episodes where I explain things like, some of the federal criminal law and some of the things that are happening, like, when, we have the president necessarily doing certain things. I'll explain, from having to write the law, what, certain decisions mean. I will explain some of my experiences because most people don't know that most of those drug boat cases, like when the president was blowing up the drug boats recently, 97% of those cases came to Tampa. So I always had at least seven of those cases almost at all times. So I had to deal with, those people. So I know an awful lot about those. A lot about the immigration stuff. I talk about those different things. I also talk about um, getting to necessarily know yourself. I give tips as far as, making sure that you know how to make your own decisions. I talk about things like how people are identifying as things because perception and actually being that thing isn't as, important. It's not important to be that thing. Most people just want to be perceived as that specific thing, and how that has negatively affected society, and that you should try to be that thing and not just be perceived as that. So I mean, I go through a lot of things, relationship things, from the aspect of being a lawyer, and how things have changed with people. There's a lot of different topics that I cover, but for the most part, it's trying to help people to be better and to recognize, the things that we need to change, necessarily as society, as individuals, and all those different types of things.
Thank you so much for sharing. I just wanted to make sure to mention it since I know you have it out there and we're on a podcast as well. Now, I definitely appreciate you coming on the show today. I appreciate you sharing all the things inside of your journey, and we always honor our guest by giving you guys the last word. So if you can, Percy, please look into the camera and tell the people something good.
Okay. Well, I'm basically going to tell you a quote. Now, the quote is that it's something that I made. It says, "Success is objective. Do not subject yourself to any other belief." And essentially, what that means is that quite often what we do is we just end up giving up at a certain point and saying, okay, well, this is good enough. Now, the only way and the only time that you should do that is if and when you look up and you realize that you are happy and that further pursuit would make you unhappy. Thanks.
Awesome. Thank you so much for sharing that. That's a very wise quote. And appreciate you coming on the show today.
Thank you very much, gentlemen.
Excellent. And to everyone that is watching, be kind and thanks.